That was an experience. I've just finished Hellblade, a journey through the main character's psychosis as she tries to rescue her loved ones from a Viking version of hell. Some pretty heavy topics, to be honest, and ones not usually covered by games. As someone who has had his own journey through mental illness, I would like to discuss the topic in general and how it is usually approached in games and why this game is quite important in my opinion. My name is Billy and this is the Diginauts show. I'm going to try and avoid spoilers as much as possible. In my opinion, this game is better experienced without them, and I think if you have any interest in the topics discussed or what you see on the screen, I think it is definitely worth picking up and playing. One of the first things you notice playing the game, especially if you're using headphones as recommended, are the voices. There are several, some louder than others, often giving you contradicting information. One will say to continue, whilst another states that the path will lead to your death. They are all a part of an oppressive inner dialogue for Senwa, the protagonist. Something she and others in her world have labelled her darkness, a simple descriptor for her psychosis. Even though the voices were in the forefront, the next thing I noticed, and something that is shown perfectly by video games, is a fogginess to navigating the world. The game often plays with the geography of an area, with the landscape completely changing by looking at it from a different angle. This actually becomes a gameplay mechanic for progression, but at first it felt like it was an actual issue with myself, confusing the way I came. This is actually played upon by the story as well. Instead of having a completely linear progression, the game skips forward, the amount of time is undefined, and the area Senwa finds herself in can be completely different, making it feel like you're wading through a murky fog. The visual hallucinations are also not to be forgotten, making a setting for some of the most memorable and affecting scenes of the game. Everything from luminescent colours to the world almost seeming like shattered glass. It was worth noting that a lot of the effects of the psychosis are taken directly from sufferers, with some almost exact experiences being used. If and when you finish the game, I highly recommend watching the featurette that they put out. See the world through eyes anew. This featurette is actually quite central to my point here, so I'll give a bit of an overview of it. It basically discusses how they decided to make a game about something as complex as mental illness, and how they wanted to make sure to treat it with the care and attention it deserves, to avoid misrepresentation of a already marginalised section of society. They did this by inviting the advice from both experts and sufferers alike. It seems like they were asked at pretty much every stage of development for their opinion. This allows the game to do justice to something that is a very difficult topic. To do anything else could deepen the stigma attached to mental health. I'll be honest, at this stage, I have personally suffered with mental illness in the past, and I can see how impossible it could be to get people to empathise with your position. I do not mean that people don't try, but they seem to rarely succeed, unless they've had similar experiences that they can equate to it. The weight that it can affect someone should not be understated, making something so simple as performing normal routines, like showering or eating properly, a challenge. It can make socialising feel like a heavy weight around you. You often hear of people self-medicating or developing self-destructive tendencies. And not only this, but we still have the issue of social stigma that is attached to it. The knowledge held by the general public seems to be much better than it was a few years ago. I talked to some of my family members who have had such issues 40 odd years ago, where there was not even a conversation to be had. It was chin up and get on with it. Something that unfortunately I have even heard myself. And I'm sorry, but it's not so simple.
It's so quiet. So dark.
It's okay. Listen to your own breath.
But can you blame people for thinking this is the solution if they've had good mental health all their lives? Also, the education is only just catching up. Not everyone is privileged to be raised with some level of understanding. I mean, going back to games for 1 second, mental health is usually portrayed in a negative light. It is the deranged asylum dwellers, the insane bad guys, or some other malconceived stereotype. But then I ask the question, how do we make a change in society to make the discussion and knowledge surrounding mental health more ubiquitous? To to the point where it's not even a point of contention and just taken for fact. Just the information is out there to such a degree that people don't even need to question it.
The ship broke up under them.
Well, games could help. Hear me out. The symptoms I've already put forward for psychosis, the ones represented in this game, would be near impossible to get the full weight across with just words. But sitting there for 7 odd hours playing this game gives you some representation of what this may be like, some close approximation at least. One real benefit of games, it allows concepts such as this to breathe, gives them the space they need to mature and be taken in by a player. There are few other mediums that sit you centrally in the experience, especially with the interactive element. Along with even short games last longer than most movies, really allowing these concepts and ideas to sink in. It may even allow people to get some semblance of empathy for the issue. I mean, actually hearing the voices rotate around your head as you play, although it's a semi-simple of an effect, it remains with me even after finishing the game. I would have no idea of any semblance of what this may feel like. I can read a list of symptoms for psychosis. Hearing voices is a prominent identifier, but this is just a piece of data on a list. It has borderline no weight to it as a concept, not when it comes to describing something so ethereal as mental illness. I think the stigma surrounding something like psychosis is especially massive. Society tends to look down on people hearing voices, and this marginalises them, puts them to one side, but if we can open a discussion, allow it to be regularly talked about and remove as much of the stigma as possible, it gives the people who need help the ability to come forward and get it. If it gets to be part of the greater discussion, then I think many can benefit. I think at that stage it also forces the political powers that be to listen and give adequate thought and funding, which is only better for society as a whole. There is some very valid critique to be levelled at this game and how it's handled its combat, even some of the puzzle elements inside, though I do think that was probably more intentional to the story. But games like this always make me appreciate my preferred medium even further. They show me there's a great breadth and depth of experiences to still be explored, more great stories to be told, more worlds to be a part of, and who knows, it might even benefit people along the way.